She can never know.
His breath was hot against her neck. Her hands trembled as she pulled away, not from guilt alone, but from the weight of what they'd just done, what they'd been doing for months. The hotel room was too quiet now. Morning light crept through heavy curtains, touching the tangled sheets, her dress on the floor, the reality neither of them wanted to face. But it was there, undeniable. She sat on the edge of the bed slowly, as if movement itself might shatter everything. 47 years of being the composed one, the trusted friend, the woman who never crossed lines, all of it dissolved the moment she looked at him differently. At her best friend's son, she pressed her fingers to her lips, not to erase his kiss, but to silence the truth trying to surface. This wasn't supposed to happen. But to understand how they got here, you need to go back. Back to a night when Chicago's skyline glittered like broken promises against Lake Michigan, when everything was still safe, still innocent, still possible to walk away from. Back to the moment Julian Ashford first saw Sienna Blake, not as the woman who taught him to skip stones as a child, but as the woman who would unravel every boundary he'd ever known. The Ashford Beauty Gala was the kind of event where power wore emerald green and confidence sparkled brighter than champagne. Catherine Ashford, at 52, commanded the Shed Aquarium Terrace like the CEO she was, a force of nature in heels, her cosmetics empire reflected in every camera flash, every whispered deal being made around her. This was her world, her creation, and standing beside her, arm wrapped around her waist in that easy way only decades of friendship allows, was Sienna Blake. Navy gown flowing, skin glowing under city lights, 47 years old, and radiant in a way that defied every shallow rule about aging. Two black women who'd climbed mountains together, celebrated victories together, raised a child together. Because Sienna wasn't just Catherine's best friend, she was family. She was the one who'd been there through everything, the one who'd held Julian when Catherine worked late, who'd baked with him when he was sick, who'd become a second mother without ever claiming the title. And Julian? At 28, he arrived in a charcoal suit that made him look every inch his mother's son, ambitious, poised, pale skin against the predominantly black crowd he'd grown up in without hesitation. He'd never questioned his place in this family, never questioned anything about the woman he called Auntie Sienna. Until tonight. Until he hugged his mother and turned to greet her best friend, and something shifted. Something dangerous. The way the lights caught Sienna's eyes. The warmth in her smile that suddenly felt like fire. The casual touch of her hand on his arm that sent electricity straight through him. This was wrong. This was Auntie Sienna, the woman who'd practically raised him. But his heart didn't care about labels anymore. Later, on a balcony overlooking the lake, Catherine orchestrated a photo. Her son, her best friend. The perfect family portrait. Sienna and Julian leaned in. Their cheeks brushed. And in that half-second of contact, Julian felt heat that had nothing to do with the summer air. He stepped back too quickly, smiled too bright, prayed his mother couldn't see what was happening inside him. Catherine laughed, delighted with her picture, completely unaware that she just captured the exact moment her son fell for the one woman he could never have, the one woman who could destroy everything. The gala noise faded. Catherine swept off to charm investors, and suddenly Julian and Sienna stood alone at the railing, Lake Michigan stretching dark and endless before them. He leaned close to hear her over the distant jazz, too close. Close enough to catch her perfume, sandalwood and jasmine, close enough to see the pulse at her throat. She talked about Chicago, about magic, about nights like this, but all Julian heard was the thunder of his own heartbeat. All he saw was the curve of her neck, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she smiled when she caught him staring. She remembered stories from his childhood, when he'd fall asleep on her lap after long days by this same lake, back when everything was simple, when love meant safety, not catastrophe. Their fingers brushed when he touched the gold watch on her wrist, Catherine's gift to Sienna years ago. An innocent gesture, except nothing felt innocent anymore. They sat on a bench, talked about his dreams, her fears, the businesses they were building, the lives they were living. Surface conversation hiding undertow, And when Sienna patted his hand, when her fingertips lingered just a second too long, Julian knew. She felt it too. This impossible, unthinkable pull between them. The jazz from the gala drifted over the water. Catherine's laughter echoed somewhere behind them. And Julian Ashford made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. He was going to pursue this, no matter the cost. That night, alone in his bedroom while Chicago slept, Julian stared at the ceiling and whispered the truth into the darkness. I'm in trouble. But trouble was too small a word for what was coming. Because across town, Sienna lay awake too, replaying every moment, every touch, every look they'd shared, fighting feelings she couldn't name, refusing desires she couldn't admit. And Catherine Ashford, brilliant and trusting and completely blind, slept peacefully, never suspecting that her son and her best friend had just crossed an invisible line neither of them could uncross. 3 weeks later, Julian would text Sienna, asking to meet for coffee. Just advice about his mother's birthday gift, he'd say. A lie. The first of many. Because what he really wanted was time alone with her, permission to explore what terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. And Sienna, despite every warning screaming in her head, would say yes. She'd walk into that Hyde Park cafe in a yellow blouse that made her look younger than her years, sit across from Catherine's son, and let him take her hand across the table. Let him tell her he thought about her constantly. Let him say the words that would detonate their perfect little family. I love you. But here's what nobody tells you about forbidden love. Once you acknowledge it, once you name it, once you let it breathe between you like a living thing, there's no putting it back. The secret has teeth. And it will devour everything in its path. So ask yourself this. When desire collides with loyalty, when your heart wants what your conscience forbids, when loving someone means betraying someone else you love just as much, what do you choose? And more importantly, can you live with that choice when the person you've betrayed is the woman who gave you everything, who trusted you with everything, who never saw the betrayal coming because it came from the 2 people she loved most in this world? What would you do? The text message was innocent enough. 7 words that would change everything. Need birthday gift advice for my mom. Coffee? But innocence was already dead between them. Sienna stared at her phone screen for 3 full minutes before responding. She knew what this was. Knew it wasn't about Catherine's birthday. Knew that saying yes meant stepping over a line drawn in blood and loyalty and decades of friendship. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Yes or no. Safety or chaos. The life she knew or the life she couldn't stop imagining. She typed 1 word, sure, and with that single syllable, she sealed all their fates. The lair of the local cafe in Hyde Park smelled like dark roast and bad decisions. Saturday morning sun filtered through windows where University of Chicago students bent over laptops, oblivious to the quiet devastation about to unfold in the corner booth. Sienna arrived first, dressed in jeans and a vibrant yellow blouse that made her look younger than her 47 years. Hair piled gracefully on her head, in a way that seemed effortless, but had taken 20 minutes to perfect. Why had she tried so hard? She knew why. Julian slid into the booth opposite her, all 6 feet of nervous energy in athletic white frame that somehow managed to look both confident and terrified. His smile was shy. Too shy for someone just asking about a birthday gift. They both knew the real reason they were here. The air between them crackled with everything unsaid. Morning, he said, fingers already fidgeting with his coffee spoon. Thanks for meeting me. The formality was absurd. This woman had wiped his nose when he was 5, had taught him to ride a bike, had been at every birthday party, every graduation, every milestone. But sitting across from her now, Julian couldn't remember any of that. All he could see was the curve of her neck, the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way her lips moved when she smiled. All he could feel was the thundering in his chest that screamed, this was wrong, wrong, catastrophically wrong, and he was going to do it anyway. They talked about Catherine's birthday, architecture tours, art institute tickets, personalized grooming kits, surface conversation, floating on top of the real conversation, happening in glances and pauses, and the way their hands kept almost touching on the table. Then Julian said something that cracked the veneer wide open. "Honestly, Sienna, I just don't want to screw this up." He wasn't talking about the gift. She knew he wasn't talking about the gift. Her hand moved across the table, touching his lightly, and she said, "Your mom adores you. Don't panic." But her voice was too soft, too intimate, too much like a woman comforting a man she cared about in ways that had nothing to do with maternal instinct. The conversation shifted. They laughed about Catherine's endless grooming products, joked about conditioner he'd never used, traded stories about childhood memories that felt safe until they didn't. Until Julian leaned forward and said, "I've always admired you, Auntie Sienna." And there it was. That word, auntie, a barrier, a reminder, a last line of defense against what they both wanted. He continued, voice dropping lower, "Growing up, you were like another mom to me. Taking me to movies when my mom worked late, baking with me when I was sick." Past tense. Were, like he was already eulogizing the relationship they used to have to make room for the relationship they were becoming. Sienna felt her heart tighten. Those memories were precious to her, real. She'd loved this boy, this man, since he was small enough to fit in her lap. She'd watched him grow, guided him, protected him. And now she was sitting here letting him hold her hand across a coffee shop table while every cell in her body screamed that this was betrayal of the highest order. "I've always loved you, Julian," she said, and the word love hung between them like a loaded gun. You were the best part of Catherine's world. Were, past tense again, as if they were already mourning what they were about to destroy. "And you've grown into such a remarkable man." There, she'd said it, acknowledged him not as the child she'd raised, but as the man she desired. His hand closed around hers, not the casual touch of family, the deliberate grip of a man claiming something, someone. They changed the subject again, desperate to step back from the precipice, talking about salsa dancing and hobbies and 2 left feet. But midway through their second cappuccino, Sienna's mask slipped. "You know, Jules," she said, using the old nickname that made him feel like he was hers, "sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough with my life. I'm busy, I'm ambitious, but I'm getting older. It's strange. There was a time I thought by 47 I'd have it all figured out. Children, marriage, everything. Vulnerability, the most dangerous weapon in the arsenal of forbidden love." She was showing him her wounds, her fears, her unfulfilled dreams, inviting him to see her not as Auntie Sienna, but as a woman who wanted things she didn't have, as a woman who might want him. Julian reached across the table, his hand gentle on her cup, tilting it back toward her. "Life doesn't work that way. You're amazing at so many things, style, creativity, wisdom. Not everyone finds that at any age." He was looking at her like she was the answer to questions he hadn't known he was asking. Like she was possibility incarnate. "I appreciate that, Jules," she whispered, and her voice cracked just enough to betray the emotion building inside her. "I just sometimes feel vulnerable, like time is slipping away." She was 47. He was 28. 19 years between them. 19 years of life experience, of cultural references, of different generations looking at the world through different lenses. But in that moment, the gap disappeared. In that moment, they were just 2 people drowning in want. "I get it," Julian said, and his voice was solemn, weighted with a vulnerability of his own. "I feel pressure too. Not the same kind, of course. My mom has high hopes for me. Sometimes I feel like I don't measure up." And there it was. The thing they had in common. Both of them living under Catherine's expectations. Both of them desperate to be more than what they were. Both of them seeking validation in the one place they absolutely should not look. Sienna reached across with both hands now, holding his hand like it was something precious, something breakable. "You measure up. You're smart and handsome and kind." Handsome. She'd said handsome. Crossed another line. Acknowledged his physical appeal. Acknowledged that she saw him as a man worth wanting. They locked eyes. The coffee shop faded. The students, the espresso machine, the Saturday morning sunlight. All of it dissolved until there was nothing but this booth and this moment and this catastrophic truth they could no longer deny. Julian's breathing quickened. "I'm lucky to have you and Mom in my life," Mom. The third person in this conversation, the ghost at the table, the woman who would be destroyed by what they were doing. The barista announced dessert specials. Julian ordered cheesecake and another latte for Sienna, and in the mundane act of ordering, they both tried to pretend this was normal, that they weren't sitting in a cafe plotting emotional terrorism against the woman they both loved. Then Julian broke. Can I be honest with you? Sienna's heart fluttered. Always. He looked away, gathered courage, looked back with eyes that were earnest and desperate and terrified. Whenever you're near, I feel wonderful. Simple words. Devastating words. An admission that couldn't be taken back. Sienna didn't smile. She just listened, holding space for the confession that would damn them both. There, I said it. His cheeks reddened like a boy's, but his gaze was all man. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that comes when you're drowning and someone throws you an anchor instead of a life preserver. I feel wonderful too, Julian. It's okay to say that, but it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. Julian hesitated, then pushed forward, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It isn't okay, though. You're my mother's best friend. I shouldn't even think like this. There it was, the truth laid bare. Not just attraction, not just affection, but full awareness of the betrayal they were contemplating, full knowledge of what this would cost. And still, neither of them stood up and walked away. Sienna's heart stopped. The rational part of her brain screamed at her to end this, to tell him he was confused, to restore the boundaries. That had kept them safe for 28 years. Julian, she started, but before she could form the words that would save them, her phone buzzed. Catherine, texting from the beauty expo. Congrats again last night. Love you guys. 3 people, 1 text. Love you guys. Plural, both of them, the son and the best friend, wrapped up together in Catherine's easy affection, her absolute trust, her complete ignorance of the bomb ticking between them. Sienna let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Your mom just texted. Are you okay? Julian nodded, running a hand through his dark curls in a gesture that made him look lost, young, breakable. Sorry, just needed to say it out loud. He met her eyes with a gaze that was pleading, desperate, drowning. I can't stop thinking about you. The words landed like grenades. Can't stop thinking about you. Not a casual admission, not a fleeting crush, an obsession, a need. The kind of confession that precedes disasters. Sienna's breath came fast. She stood, the booth suddenly too small, too intimate, too dangerous. She turned slightly, seeking privacy in a public space, and placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. The touch was maternal, protective, except it wasn't. Not anymore. This is confusing for me too, baby. Baby. Oh God, she'd called him baby. A term of endearment that could be familial or romantic, innocuous or damning depending on the inflection. And the way she'd said it, voice low and thick with emotion, there was no mistaking which one she meant. But we have to be careful. Julian looked up at her, hope and fear warring in his expression. Because I'm your son, or because you're my mother's friend? The question was designed to trap her into admitting the truth. Because if the only problem was Catherine's friendship, that implied there was no inherent wrongness in their attraction, that the only barrier was external, not internal, that they could justify this if they tried hard enough. Sienna saw the trap and walked into it anyway. Both, she said firmly, though her firmness was a lie. Her tone came from love and loyalty, but it was love and loyalty fracturing in real time. Julian, I'd never hurt your mom. We have a friendship, a life. This could ruin everything. He looked wounded. Actually wounded, like she'd struck him. I know. But I can't change what I feel. And there was the impasse. Feelings versus morality. Desire versus duty. The oldest conflict in human history playing out in a Hyde Park cafe over cooling cappuccinos. She felt tears well up, hot and humiliating. We both have to. It's complicated. Complicated. The most inadequate word in the English language. What they were doing wasn't complicated. It was simple. Simple and catastrophic. They sat in silence. The clink of cups on saucers. Chicago's afternoon sun sifting through the trees outside. The sounds of normal life continuing around them while their world tilted on its axis. Neither moved, both paralyzed by want and guilt in equal measure. Then Julian did something that surprised them both. He gently took her hand, his fingers warm and sure around hers. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice breaking. I love you. I should have never said it. Love. Not attraction. Love. The word that changes everything, that transforms casual feeling into life-altering declaration. The word you can never take back once it's released into the world. Sienna squeezed his hand, tears now openly falling. "You didn't hurt me, dear." But that was a lie. He had hurt her. Not through cruelty, but through honesty. He'd said aloud what she'd been trying not to feel for weeks, maybe months, maybe years. He'd named the thing that would destroy them all. Julian glanced up, hoping she'd tell him he was wrong, that this was impossible, that they could never happen. But instead, he saw her eyes glistening with tears that meant yes and no, and please, and stop, and I love you too, and how dare you, and we can't, and maybe we can, and I hate you for making me feel this, and thank you for seeing me, and God help us both. He learned in that moment that love was a risk, that desire was a weapon, that the human heart was capable of wanting multiple contradictory things simultaneously and feeling justified in all of them. They left the cafe quietly, the mood heavy as Lake Michigan fog. No more birthdays were mentioned. The conversation devolved into awkward small talk, weather, traffic, weekend plans, the social anesthesia people use when the real conversation is too dangerous to continue. They parted ways on the sidewalk, both lost in thoughts they couldn't share, both carrying the weight of confessions that couldn't be unconfessed. But here's what Julian didn't know. As he walked away from that coffee shop, Sienna went home and cried for 3 hours. Cried for Catherine, who would be devastated. Cried for herself, for being foolish enough to feel this at 47 when she should know better. Cried for Julian, for the impossible situation his honesty had created. And then, when the crying stopped, she did something worse. She imagined what it would be like if they could be together. Imagined his hands in her hair, his lips on her skin, his body next to hers. Imagined a life where Catherine didn't exist, where social norms didn't exist, where the 19-year age gap was irrelevant and the history between them was erased, and they could just be two people who wanted each other without consequences. The fantasy was detailed and vivid and utterly intoxicating, and when she finally forced herself to stop, to return to reality, the real world felt colorless by comparison. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of Julian and Sienna avoiding each other, avoiding Catherine's invitations, making excuses to not be in the same room because proximity was gasoline and they were already on fire. 3 weeks of Catherine being confused by their sudden distance, asking Sienna if something was wrong, asking Julian if he'd offended Sienna somehow. 3 weeks of lies, small lies at first, busy with work, not feeling well, prior commitments, but lies nonetheless. Each one a tiny betrayal, each one making the next lie easier. This is how affairs begin, not with grand passionate gestures, but with small deceptions that accumulate like snow before an avalanche. Then Catherine made a decision that would detonate everything. She decided her family needed quality time together, decided that whatever weirdness was happening between her son and her best friend could be fixed with sunshine and community and the joyful chaos of Chicago's biggest cultural celebration. She invited them to the Bud Billiken Parade, the largest African to American parade in the United States, held annually since 1929 in Bronzeville, a jubilant back-to-school celebration that drew hundreds of thousands. Marching bands, floats, dancing, music, children's laughter, gospel choirs, soul music, the entire South Side coming together in exuberant community. The kind of event you can't refuse without arousing suspicion. The kind of event where you're trapped in close proximity for hours with no escape. Sienna said yes because saying no would require explanation. Julian said yes for the same reason. And Catherine, brilliant and trusting and catastrophically blind, smiled with satisfaction at bringing her family back together. The August day was warm, Bronzeville buzzing with excitement. Music thundered from every corner. Children danced in the streets. The boulevard filled with color and movement and life. Sienna wore a light summer dress and wide-brimmed hat that should have made her look maternal, safe, unthreatening. Instead, she looked radiant. Julian wore casual shorts and a polo, trying for relaxed and landing somewhere near terrified. Catherine led them through the crowd, taking pictures, laughing with old friends, completely missing the tension crackling between her son and her best friend like a downed power line. "Look at those smiles," Catherine said to Sienna, gesturing at the parade. "Mom would love being here." She meant her own mother. Sienna's surrogate mother, the woman who'd helped raise them both. Another ghost at the party, another person who would be ashamed of what they were doing. Julian offered Sienna ice cream. A simple gesture, chivalrous. The kind of thing a good young man does for his elder, except when a little girl accidentally splashed whipped cream on his nose and Sienna laughed, really laughed, the kind of uninhibited joy that transforms a face, and reached up to wipe it away with her napkin. Their eyes met, and the world stopped. Catherine, distracted snapping photos 10 feet away, missed the entire exchange, missed the way Julian's breath caught, missed the way Sienna's hand lingered on his face a second too long, missed the way they stood there, arms swinging in sync, moving in unconscious harmony like dancers who'd been partners for years. She saw them, but she didn't see them. The human mind has an extraordinary capacity to not see what it doesn't want to believe. Later, Catherine left them to catch up with college friends by the Victory Monument. Finally, Julian and Sienna were alone in a crowd of thousands. They walked slowly toward a fountain, music from gospel choirs and soul bands floating in the humid air. They didn't speak, just walked, bumping elbows, then arms, then shoulders. Sienna leaned into Julian as they passed a group singing, feeling his tall frame steady and warm beside her. He offered his arm. She took it, not the way a woman takes a young relative's arm, the way a woman takes a man's arm. Possessive, intimate, claiming. From a distance, Catherine saw them and felt pride. Saw her son and her best friend enjoying the parade together, and thought, isn't this wonderful? Isn't this what family looks like? Isn't this proof that whatever tension had been between them was resolved? She had no idea that amid the crowd, Julian had gone quiet, his heart hammering against his ribs. No idea that he'd stopped walking, turned to face Sienna fully, and whispered, "Sienna, I'm sorry. I worry I hurt your feelings last time." No idea that Sienna had smiled sadly and said, "Julian, it's okay. Truly, family should be honest about feelings, but we need to keep perspective. Family." She kept using that word like a talisman against darker magic. Julian searched her eyes, desperate for guidance. "I don't want to hurt anyone, least of all your mother. Your mother, not my mother." He was already separating Catherine from Sienna, compartmentalizing his relationships, preparing to choose one over the other, even if he didn't realize it yet. Sienna tried to redirect, dredge up safe memories. "Look, this parade. Do you remember as a kid, you marched here with your mom in a little neighborhood dance troupe?" He blinked, surprised she remembered. "You remember that?" "Of course I do. You were so tiny holding that flag." She laughed, and for a moment the tension eased. They were back on safe ground. History, childhood, the past where love was simple and uncomplicated. They watched children pile candy, watched the floats roll by, watched the world celebrate life and community and joy. Sienna linked her arm through his again. His warmth seared through the thin fabric of his shirt. And in that moment, amid joyful strangers who knew nothing of their private war, neither was thinking about age or propriety or Catherine. They were just thinking about each other. Then Catherine rejoined them for a group photo on a decorative float. She directed photographers with the precision of a woman who'd built an empire on image control. Third photo, I want all of us. Sienna, Julian at my side. Perfect symmetry, perfect composition. Mother in the center, flanked by the two people she loved most. The shutter clicked. Catherine's hand rested on Sienna's back. Julian had his arm lightly around Catherine's waist. They all looked happy. Looked like the perfect family moment that would go on Catherine's desk, that would be shared on social media, that would represent everything beautiful about their bond. But being forced into proximity for the photo meant Sienna and Julian were pressed together. She felt his hip against hers. He caught her eye as they smiled at the camera. For a heartbeat, just one single heartbeat, the crowd and cameras and Chicago itself vanished. It was just them, breathless, drowning, lost. Sienna felt his breath on her cheek, warm, real, undeniable. The flash popped. Catherine exclaimed, "Love you guys." There was applause as they stepped off the float. Catherine spun them both once more in her exuberance. "Oh, we have to print that one. Perfect." Julian tried to compose a normal expression, but his pulse was racing. His hands were shaking. Sienna's pulse raced too. She dusted imaginary lint from his jacket, an excuse to touch him, to maintain contact, to feel him real and solid under her hands. They exchanged a quick, almost hidden smile, the kind of smile shared between Keogh conspirators, between lovers. For the rest of the afternoon they walked through Bronzeville's art markets, chatting about Chicago's rich history, pretending interest in paintings and sculptures while their real attention was on each other. Catherine chatted with old buddies, holding court in her element. Sienna walked between Catherine and Julian, sometimes linking arms with both. She felt safe but nervous, grounded but unmoored, like she was standing in two different lives simultaneously, and any moment she'd have to choose which one was real. On the L train home, Catherine dozed with her head on Sienna's shoulder, exhausted from the day, trusting completely in her friend's care. Julian sat across from them, watching. In the dim carriage light, he saw the vulnerability in Sienna's peaceful face, saw the love Catherine had for her friend, innocent and true and uncomplicated, saw how his mother's hand rested on Sienna's arm with complete trust. And he realized two things simultaneously: how lucky he was to have strong women like them in his life, and how completely, irrevocably in love he was with the one woman he could never have. The train rattled through the summer evening. Catherine slept. Sienna kept her eyes closed but wasn't sleeping. She could feel Julian's gaze on her like a physical touch, could feel the weight of what they were doing, what they were about to do. And she knew, sitting there with Catherine's head on her shoulder and Julian's eyes burning into her, that this was about to get so much worse. That night, after Catherine had driven Sienna home, chatting about expansion plans and new product lines, not noticing that Sienna's responses were monosyllabic and distracted, Julian couldn't sleep. Something in Chicago's heavy summer air pulled him outside. Or maybe it wasn't the air. Maybe it was the knowing. The certainty that Sienna was out there somewhere, just as restless, just as tormented. He found himself walking toward Navy Pier at midnight, the wind off Lake Michigan, cooling the warm city, but doing nothing to cool the heat inside him. He didn't plan to find her. Told himself he was just walking, just thinking, just trying to clear his head. But intention and action have always been strange bedfellows, and when he arrived at the pier and saw her there, sitting on a bench facing the water, legs crossed and eyes closed like a woman at prayer, he knew. He'd come here, hoping to find her. They were both done pretending this was coincidence. Julian. She opened her eyes as he approached, her voice soft but not surprised. She'd been expecting him, or hoping for him, or dreading him, possibly all three. He lifted his hands in a gesture of surrender or supplication. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come," but he wasn't sorry. That much was clear in the way he walked toward her, purposeful, decided. She shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "No, I'm glad you did. It's beautiful, isn't it?" Chicago's lights surrounded them. Navy Pier's Ferris wheels spun in rainbow rings behind them. Downtown skyscrapers glowed like diamonds across the water. The city was alive, electric, magical. It felt like a dream, the kind of dream you have before nightmares. They sat together on the bench at what Sienna tried to maintain as a respectful distance. Julian immediately closed it. Waves lapped quietly. A lone boat horn sounded somewhere in the darkness. They watched the skyline's reflection ripple on the lake, neither speaking, both waiting for the other to break first. Finally, Sienna took a breath. "You look troubled." It was an understatement. He looked wrecked. He looked at her, and something in his expression unclenched. "I needed to see you, not wanted, needed." The language of addiction. "I think about you all the time." There it was again, that confession. But this time, in the dark, under the stars, with no coffee shop walls to contain it. This time, it felt bigger, more dangerous, more real. "Julian." Sienna started, but he stood before she could finish, stood and faced her, and suddenly they were close enough that the breeze lifting the ends of her dress brushed against his legs. Close enough to feel each other's body heat. Close enough to smell each other's skin. He felt nervous like never before, not in boardrooms, not in job interviews, not in any of the high-pressure situations his privileged life had prepared him for, because none of those situations had stakes like this. "This is crazy, I know." His voice was rough, raw. She stood too, unable to stay seated when he was standing, unable to maintain distance when distance felt like death. They stood so close now, their shoulders touched. She could see every detail of his face in the moonlight. The strong jaw, the dark curls falling across his forehead, the desperate hope in his eyes. This beautiful boy, this grown man, this catastrophic choice, standing in front of her, asking to be chosen. "You know your mother is my best friend," she whispered, giving him one last chance to walk away, one last chance to let them both off the hook. This can't happen, but even as she said it, she knew it was happening, was already happened, had maybe been happening since the gala or the coffee shop, or perhaps since the day she'd first held him as a baby and felt that surge of love that seemed too big for just maternal affection. He placed a hand gently on her arm. The touch was electric. "I know. That's what I want to tell you." He leaned down a little, afraid he might break if she moved away, more afraid she wouldn't. The scent of her perfume, sandalwood with a hint of jasmine, filled his senses and unmade him. "You have been like family to me, like an aunt." He paused, swallowed hard. "But you're so much more to me than that. Sienna, I love you." The words hung in the air between them, impossible to recall, impossible to ignore. He closed his eyes, waiting for rejection, for anger, for the sensible response that would save them both. She felt tears sting her eyes. "Julian, I am so sorry. I never meant..." But what had she never meant? Never meant to feel this? Never meant to encourage him? Never meant to want him back? All of it was true, and none of it mattered because here they were, and the wanting was mutual and devastating. He reached out, placing his other hand beside hers on the bench, bracketing her, not touching but present. She looked up at him. They held each other's gaze. Neither spoke. The moment stretched, elastic and fragile, pregnant with every possible future. Then he bent and pressed his lips softly to her forehead. A reverent gesture. The kind of kiss you give someone you worship, someone you die for, someone you're about to destroy your life for. She didn't pull away. Her eyes fluttered closed. His lips were warm against her skin, gentle, asking permission. And she gave it. Gave permission with her stillness, with her acceptance, with the small sound that escaped her throat that wasn't quite a sigh and wasn't quite a sob. He whispered against her forehead, his voice low and broken. "You're my mother's best friend," stating the fact, acknowledging the betrayal, making sure they both understood exactly what they were doing. She gasped quietly, eyes opening, the reality of it crashing over her. But he wasn't done. "And I can't resist you." Now her eyes were firmly open, locked on his. She saw every fear and every hope in them. Saw the boy she'd raised and the man who wanted her. Saw past and future colliding in this impossible present. Her breath caught. This was the moment. The moment where she could still say no, could still stop this, could still save all three of them from what was coming. Julian stood slowly, giving her space, giving her choice. He took her hand in his, not pulling, just holding, offering, waiting. Tenderness flowed between them, but fear glistened on her face. Sienna. His voice was a prayer and a plea. Unable to protest, unable to think, unable to do anything but feel, she let him draw her into a gentle embrace. His arms circled her waist, hers wrapped around his shoulders. The city noises faded. The world faded. There was nothing but this moment, this choice, this point of no return. He pulled back slightly to look at her face. Really look at her. See all of her. "I have loved you for so long," he murmured, voice trembling with emotion. "I thought it would never happen, but I can't fight it anymore." The confession was complete, total. He'd laid himself bare, given her everything, made himself completely vulnerable. Tears spilled from Sienna's eyes, hot and shameful and relieved. "Julian," she whispered, but she was unsure what came after his name. Unsure what she could possibly say that would make this right, or make it stop, or make it okay. The age difference shimmered like mirage. The boundaries they were about to cross glittered like broken glass. All the reasons this was impossible crowded her mind. And still, she placed a trembling hand on his cheek. He leaned into it like a man dying of thirst drinking water. "Please, say something." His eyes were hopeful, vulnerable, completely open to whatever hurt she might deliver. Her lips quivered. She felt herself fracturing, all her carefully constructed defenses crumbling. She was 47 years old. She'd survived divorce, career setbacks, the casual cruelties of aging in a youth-obsessed world. She'd built herself into someone strong and independent and unshakable, and this 28-year-old man, this boy she'd helped raise, was unmaking her with nothing but honesty. Her voice broke. "I love you too." The words were quiet but clear, definitive, damning. It was quiet for half a second, and then the world erupted. He kissed her softly on the lips. A delicate, chaste kiss, but it melted years of restraint. She froze for half a second as old loyalties battled new desire, as the face of her best friend flashed through her mind, as guilt tried one last time to stop this catastrophe. And then she kissed him back. Kissed him with all the love she'd buried, all the desire she'd denied, all the loneliness she'd pretended didn't exist. The kiss deepened, became something neither of them could take back. They held each other under the Chicago moon, hearts racing, breathing hard, both knowing they'd just crossed a line that would change everything. Forever. Afterward, they stayed on the bench, heads close, foreheads touching, trying to catch their breath and failing because the air between them was too charged to breathe properly. No one else was there. The pier was empty, the city asleep, bearing witness to their betrayal in silence. He cupped her face with both hands, thumbs wiping away her tears. "We should slow down. I know it's a lot, but slowing down was impossible when you were already in freefall." She nodded anyway, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I'm terrified." Her voice was small, younger than her 47 years. "I'm terrified too," he admitted. And in that shared terror, they found strange comfort. They sat together in silence, watching the city, watching the Ferris wheel's lights blink like a heartbeat, matching their uncertainty and thrill. Finally, Sienna took a breath and said what they'd both been avoiding. "We have to tell her. Your mother." The words landed heavy as stones. Julian's face fell. The fantasy evaporated. Reality returned with all its sharp edges. "I'm not sure how. I'm not sure I want to, honestly." His voice was barely audible. "But—" He closed his eyes, remembering Catherine's kindness, her trust, her love. Remembering every sacrifice she'd made for him, every time she'd chosen him over her own needs, every moment of unconditional support. She deserves to know the truth, the horrible relationship-ending truth. Sienna squeezed his hand. "Me too." 2 words, 1 promise. They would tell her together. They would face Catherine together. They would destroy her together. But when? When do you tell your mother you're in love with her best friend? When do you tell your best friend you're in love with her son? What words do you use? What time of day makes it less devastating? What location makes the betrayal easier to swallow? These questions hung between them, unanswered, and perhaps unanswerable. The next morning, Chicago awoke with the lake at sunrise, painting the sky gold and pink and orange. Beautiful. Indifferent. The city didn't care about their private drama. Life continued. Buses ran. People went to work. Children played. And somewhere in the city, Catherine Ashford woke up trusting that her family was intact, that her best friend loved her, that her son was loyal. She woke up in a reality that no longer existed. That had been destroyed at midnight on Navy Pier by two people she'd loved without question. A week passed in tension and silence. Catherine was on a business trip in New York, and perhaps that distance was a mercy. Perhaps it gave Julian and Sienna time to figure out how to detonate their lives. Perhaps it gave them time to change their minds, except they didn't change their minds. Instead, they texted, met in secret, kissed in parking garages and empty parks and anywhere they wouldn't be seen, fell deeper and harder and more catastrophically in love, while Catherine sent cheerful texts from her hotel, "Miss you guys, can't wait to be home." Each text was a knife. Each text was a reminder of what they were about to destroy. Guilt pounded in both of them like a Chicago metro train, loud, relentless, impossible to ignore. Finally, one evening, Catherine phoned Sienna. "Sweetheart, I want to come over. It's important." The tone was gentle but cautious. Something in Catherine's voice suggested she knew, or suspected, or felt the shift in the universe that happens when people you love are lying to you. Sienna's pulse raced. This was it. The moment of truth they'd been dreading and preparing for. Should she confess first? Control the narrative? Soften the blow somehow? She squeezed her eyes shut and steadied her voice, trying for normal and landing somewhere near terrified. Okay, one word, one agreement, one acceptance of consequences. When Catherine arrived at Sienna's Lincoln Park condo, she found her friend waiting on the couch. Sienna's eyes were red, face blotchy from crying. She'd been crying on and off for 3 days, trying to prepare herself for this moment. Catherine hugged her immediately, concern radiating from every pore. "You okay?" Sienna shook her head, tears slipping out fresh. She couldn't do this. Couldn't say the words that would end their friendship. Couldn't look into Catherine's trusting face and admit the ultimate betrayal. We need to talk, Catherine." Her voice was barely a whisper. Meanwhile, Julian was at his mother's penthouse, pacing the elegant living room, waiting. He'd agreed to come separately to give Sienna a chance to explain first, woman to woman, friend to friend. But now, hearing a knock on the door, he wondered if separation had been a mistake. If they should have faced her together, united. "Mom, do you want me to start the meeting?" He called out, his voice cracking on the word, Mom. Instead, Catherine strode into view. "She's ready." 3 words that meant everything was about to end. On Sienna's couch, Catherine sat heavily. She'd come from Sienna's place, and whatever Sienna had started to say had clearly shaken her. But she wanted to hear it from both of them. I needed to hear it from her son. Sienna sat across from her, hands twisting in her lap. "It's about Julian," she said softly, and Catherine's whole body tensed. She knew. At that moment, in the way Sienna said her son's name, Catherine knew. "Catherine," Sienna's voice broke, "I love your son. Not like a son, not as a family." The implication was clear in every syllable. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth. Her elegant breathing hitched. Seconds stretched impossibly long. The room felt airless. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, "What?" Sienna winced at the pain in her tone. This was worse than she'd imagined. Worse than any scenario she'd played out in her head. "It's true. I didn't plan it. But I love him." The confession hung in the air like smoke. Catherine sat down heavily, hands trembling. Her mind was whirling, trying to process, trying to understand. Julian, her son, and Sienna, her best friend, them, together. How? When? Why? "You love my son?" She repeated the words like they were in a foreign language. like if she said them enough times they might start making sense. Tears fell from Sienna's eyes, hot and shameful. "Yes, I am so sorry. I tried to fight it, but what? But desire won. But loneliness won. But his youth and attention and devotion were too intoxicating to resist." There was a deafening silence. Catherine's mind whirled through their entire history. Decades of friendship, every secret shared. Every crisis weathered together. The late-night phone calls, the celebrations, the griefs, building careers side by side, supporting each other through divorces and setbacks and triumphs. And woven through all of it, Julian, the child Catherine had entrusted to Sienna, the boy Sienna had helped raise, the son who was supposed to be off-limits by every possible definition of loyalty and propriety. "Sienna, you're like family, like a sister." How could this happen? The question wasn't rhetorical. Catherine genuinely didn't understand, couldn't fathom how the two people she trusted most in the world had betrayed her so completely. Sienna got up, dropped to her knees before Catherine, took her hands in a gesture of supplication. "Please, hear me." Her voice cracked, desperate. "I would never hurt you. I've loved you like a sister for decades." She choked on the words. But something happened. I realized I love him, not as a boy, as a man. "I know this is devastating to you." The tears came harder now, ugly crying, the kind that strips away all pretense. Catherine felt her own tears stinging. "I don't know what to feel. I feel heartbroken. Heartbroken. Such a small word for